From YouTube, James Robertson had asked us, is there an easily detectable difference between a machine-sewn kilt or a hand-sewn kilt? Can you tell the difference? If you want to tell the difference between a machine-sewn and hand-sewn, how would you?
Sure. For a machine-sewn kilt, there's different types of machine-sewn kilts. There's top-stitched, meaning you can actually see the stitching down the very, very edge of each pleat. And then there's sewn inside out or invisible stitching, where you sew the pleats together, then you open it up so you don't see any of the stitching at all. For a hand-sewn 8-yard kilt, you're sewing the pleats on the top, but you're kind of hiding the pleats or hiding the stitches as you're sewing it as best you can. You don't really want to see it. From the 10-foot rule, can you tell the difference? No, not really. There are good quality hand-sewn kilts and bad quality hand-sewn kilts, just like there are good quality machine-sewn and bad quality machine-sewn kilts in the same way.
Right.
Here's my parallel. Even, if you're even in the class at Harvard, somebody graduated last. So just because it's a hand-sewn kilt doesn't mean that it's good quality. Just because it's machine-sewn doesn't mean it's good quality. It's just a different way to skin the cat. It's a different way to do it. Mm-hmm. So now, if you go from the 10-foot rule to the 10-inch rule, where you're actually looking really, really, really closely at it, on a hand-sewn kilt, you're going to see little tiny tick marks going up each individual pleat. On a machine-sewn kilt where it's sewn inside out, so you don't see the stitching, you're not going to see any stitches going down. Mm-hmm. On a top-stitched 8-yard kilt, you're going to see stitching, really, really, really close to the edge of each pleat, but the company should use a complementary color that they're kind of hiding the stitch color in with the actual the tartan fabric. But for an 8-yard kilt, the kind of the dead giveaway is you're going to see little tiny ticks every, ideally, 1/8 of an inch going up. One of my bellwethers for a good quality 8-yard kilt, in the stitching at least, is you want to have about 8 stitches per inch. If you have, let's say, 4 stitches per inch, where it's every 1/4 inch, you're putting more stress on each individual stitch, and they're going to tend to pop over time. But the more stitches you add, the more that you're distributing that stress across all the different stitches. Mm-hmm. Now, the more stitches you have, the longer it takes to sew the kilt, which generally means it's going to be more expensive. So that's one of the ways to do it quicker, is to have less individual stitches. That is where machine-sewn kilts have an advantage, is to get more stitches per inch. It's literally just you turn the dial versus physically making more individual hand movements. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm wondering if that's something you've run into with historical kilts, Mac. Like if you're looking at World War I examples, like you can tell, kind of like where it came from or when it was made in terms of how quickly it was made and how much it was just like, we got to crank this out, like how many stitches there were versus...
Yeah, but they're going to be running on a machine, especially for
it was mostly machine at that point. Okay. Of course.
You're going to see a lot of field repairs done by hand.
Yeah.
Like I've seen where a piece of shrapnel's gone through a kilt that was reissued, and like a chunk of the front apron has been hand spliced in.
Imagine getting that one.
Yeah.
Here's your new kilt, laddie.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So yeah, you see stuff.
The guy
like
who
that.
wore it last won't be needing it anymore.
Yeah. He's got a leg missing now.
Oh.
His widow gave it to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Getting dark.
So yeah, like that. It's at that point you're just full on. They're just full bore.
Okay. They're just assembling lining it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But I know we have seen some hand-stitched kilts come through the shop.
Yeah.
And you can see that. Yeah, it's very.
We've seen plenty of hand-sewn, which is why I'm making the assertion that there are good and bad quality hand-sews. Mm-hmm. We've seen both. Yeah. We've seen good quality, machine-sewn and bad. It really boils down to the individual maker or the company and what their quality standards are. And it's if they're trying to meet a certain price point time is money. So if they're trying to meet a certain price point, they're going to cut as many corners as they can to make it in a certain amount of time to be able to provide it at a certain price point. So when that's the motive, then you have to cut corners, whether it's the guts inside the kilt, whether it's the amount of stitches per inch,
Right.
whether it's fusible interfacing on the inside versus hand sewn in. There's all kinds of different ways to cut corners.
So
Yeah.
then what would motivate you to buy a hand stitch kilt over a machine stitch? Because my assumption has been in the past that there's a romance to the hand sewn kilt that people buy into, but actually it's not necessarily that big a difference, or it's not a visually notable difference like you were saying. Is it worth paying extra for a hand sewn kilt? That's a loaded question because it's an emotional thing, but
It is, but it depends on your motives. The hand sewn kilt industry in Scotland, like the kilt industry, let's say 30 years ago, it's a cottage industry. There was a lot of hand sewn kilt makers, but it wasn't like it is now, where like for us, we have 10 kilt makers who drive to work every morning, sit in the building, and sit there sewing all day and talking and chatting back and forth. But for kilt makers in Scotland, hand-sewn kilt makers, it's a cottage industry, meaning if you ordered a hand-sewn kilt from this company, they would have 8 little old ladies sitting in their homes physically hand-sewing kilts. So you'd order it, they would order the cloth from Loch Carron or House of Edgar or whoever, ship it off to the little old lady who would sit there hand sewing the kilt. They got the measurements, they got the pattern, they got everything they need. They hand sew it, and they send it back to the company, who would then give it to you as the customer or ship it out to you. So if that is the thing you want to support, and that's the thing that's in your brain, and that's, I want Miss McIntosh to sit there and hand sew my kilt, then great. It was what you were supporting. Now, with machine-sewn kilts, some of them are, depending on the company, are kind of assembly lined. Some of them are more like us, where it's one particular kilt maker making everything soup to nuts. So hand-sewn kilts, you're getting more one maker, generally speaking. Machine-sewn kilts, it depends on the company. You could get a assembly line versus one person making it. You're still supporting a company, you're still supporting individuals and their labor, whether it's one person making it or 3 or 4. You're still supporting the heritage, so you're still supporting it, you're just doing it in a different way. Am I making sense?
Yeah. But so there isn't necessarily a lot of clout. I don't know if that's the word I want.
Bragging rights.
Bragging rights with a hand sewn kilt.
There are some.
There's some,
yes,
but
especially if and there are kilt makers, individual hand-sewn kilt makers, who will strike out on their own, who will hang out their shingle and say, "Hey, I'm going to, I'm going to make my own kilts and advertise that I make my own." And they may also subcontract for another company. Like they're looking for different ways for different types of income.
I think that would make the difference for me. Like I would consider hand sewn if I had a relationship with the artisan, like directly, like a personal thing, because it add to the experience.
Yes.
But you could say that with a kilt maker, even if they're using a machine for half and hand sewing for the other half.
Yes.
Which is in actuality is what happens here. There are parts that you just don't do, by machine.
That's why if
you care at least. But.
Yeah. No. That's why when we finish a kilt, we have the care sheet, and we have your name, the measurements, the tartan, the mill that it came from, all that kind of stuff, as well as who made your kilt. Right. We know who made the kilt, so let's give that to the customer to add that as part of the experience, knowing that they are supporting this individual, and this is the man or the woman who physically made this for you. It is not quite a bespoke, but it is a custom-made experience. So, yeah, good companies will do that.
Yeah. But
indeed.
Yeah.
Like many things in life, the quality of your kilt really comes down to the individual artisan who's making it for you. Remember, when you're going to buy a kilt, this is a lifetime investment. Make sure you are vetting the company that you're buying from, check the reviews, check referrals, all that kind of stuff, and make sure you're getting a good quality kilt that's going to last you for a long time. If you like the content that's on our channel, please give this video a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe and ring the bell so you get notifications when we come out with new content.